So hi everyone, welcome to YA ThrillerCon, and I'm joined today by Brittany Evans, who is a new writer that I've just come across thanks to her agent talking to mine, and that's always fun when I meet other YA thriller writers. So yeah, hi Brittany, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, so I'm Brittany. I'm actually a Canadian writer who has been recently represented by Megan Manzano, and I mostly write thrillers, but I also dabble in across genres. Like I'm trying to write a contemporary romance right now, so very different.
That's really cool. I love writing different genres because I also write contemporary romance under a pen name. So yeah, I'm really interested in that. So even if we don't talk about that today, I'm probably just gonna email you out the blue one day about it.
Yeah. Okay.
So you're working on the contemporary romance now. Are you working on anything sort of thriller-ish now as well?
I'm on sub with a thriller right now. Yes.
Exciting.
Yeah, my YA thriller is how I got my agent, because I queried her with it, and literally within a week I signed with Megan. It was
wow.
Yeah.
A week is so quick.
I know.
Wow, that's really impressive. So yeah, I'm on sub as well now, so I feel you for that. It's a lot of waiting, isn't it?
Yeah, I feel your pain.
So yeah, what's your writing process like then? Do you work on multiple manuscripts at the same time?
So usually I have an idea and I write out the inciting incident and the three disasters, because I use the 3-act structure most of the time for my books. And I then take personality tests to find out who my characters are. And then I also use this website called Personality Database, and I will find characters from TV shows and movies that also have that same personality to use as a reference for my characters. And before I actually start writing, I tend to
cool. I've never thought of that.
Thank you. I also tend to make Pinterest boards and Spotify playlists to figure out the mood and atmosphere of the book. And then I proceed to write the first chapter 15 times because I can never decide how to start a book. And then I'll write probably the first 10 chapters before I sit down and actually outline the rest of the book to make sure that everything is cohesive and following an actual structure.
Okay, you sound really organized, because I am just the complete opposite of that. When I write, I've just got no idea what's happening. I just sort of write to entertain myself, and then I end up with a monstrous first draft that is so messy that doesn't make sense. So you sound a lot more efficient than me.
Thank you. Except I'm an underwriter, so I tend to have to go back and add things. My word counts are always really small when I finish my first draft. I'm
okay. Yeah, my word count, my first drafts are 150,000 words of just nonsense, and it's just me rambling on and on. So it takes me a couple of drafts before I even know what type of story I'm telling. So I'm just
that's fair. I've never written a book that long before, so I'm kind of envious of that.
Yeah, it is fun, but I do think maybe I should try plotting it out a bit more, because I don't know, whenever I've tried plotting before, I just kind of feel then once I've planned it all out that I've already told the story, and then I just don't feel motivated to, because I have to be sort of surprised by what I'm writing all the time.
That happens to me sometimes too. My outline is usually just one sentence per chapter, and it can be literally as vague as so-and-so confesses their feelings. Do I know how they confess their feelings? No, I just know that that's what's going to happen. So there is still a surprise element for me.
Okay. Yeah, because surprising yourself when you're writing it is so much fun, right? And it's just I love it when the characters do really unexpected things, but when I'm doing my first draft and I don't even know who the characters are, it just makes it such a mess and nothing makes sense at all.
That's fair. I've had to rewrite entire books because I read it and I'm I clearly didn't know like what I was doing.
Right, yeah. I mean, yeah. So like how long does it take you then to sort of like write a first draft, would you say?
So it depends. It really depends on like how much time I have, how busy it
Mhm.
is like at my day job, because that depends like how exhausted I am like after work,
Yeah.
my mental health, etc.
Mhm.
The book I'm on sub with, I wrote the first draft in a month.
Oh wow.
And
That's
that's
so
really
quick.
fast for me. And I literally had it out to beta readers and edited it. Altogether, it was like 4 months.
Wow.
Yeah. And but there's been other times where it's taken me like 9 months to write a book. So it
Mm.
really like it depends on a lot of factors. Um,
Yeah.
but a month is like the fastest I've ever written a book.
That is so quick. Like
I
you
know, I
must have
know.
just been doing like nothing but writing that month. Just sleep.
Basically, it was December. I might have written a little at work.
Okay. Yeah, that's just like amazingly fast. Like I don't know, like I used to write really fast a few years ago, but like recently I've been dragging on writing so much and I can't seem to like get into a writing zone as like quickly as I used to. And I don't know, but part of my problem at the moment is that I'm working on like 4 different manuscripts and I think I just need to like focus on one and just like concentrate on one because I'm just like trying to do everything at once and it's just not really working.
That's how I feel right now, because I'm like I have two different ideas I want to work on and I can't
Mm.
decide. So I feel like I'm dragging my feet to write this next
Yeah.
book. Like,
Yeah, like I kind of just wish like I could sort of like write a whole one like in a week and then I could just like move on to the next idea like really quickly whilst it's still fresh.
yeah.
But yeah, there is no way I can write a whole book in a week. Like that's just like way too ambitious. But you do hear about people doing that and I'm just like, really? How do you
I
do
know.
that?
Even reading in a week, I'm like, how do people finish reading a book in a week? Like
Mm.
superpowers.
Yeah. Yeah, they must have superpowers. That's like the only explanation. So yeah, so you mentioned that you use like the 3 act structure. Have you always used that or is that sort of like a new thing that you're doing now?
No, that's like a new thing. I used to be a
Okay.
complete pantser when I would
Right.
I'd have like a general idea. I've always tried to like sum up my idea in a sentence and then expand it to a paragraph and go off
Mm.
that. Like as long as I knew how the book was going to end, I could write a book. But in the last like 2 books that I wrote, I found that it was just helpful for me to have a structure because like it kept all my thoughts and ideas organized and made sure like
Hmm.
everything that I wanted to happen did happen and it made sense to happen the way it did, if that makes sense.
That makes sense. Yeah. Yeah, because like I've been trying to use like the beat sheet and Save for Cat. And I've been sort of like well, because I write really messy first drafts anyway, and then I sort of like try and apply the structure to it afterwards and just trying to like fit everything in. And I'm
Mm,
sure there's got to be a much more like time efficient way of doing that. Like maybe if I sort of like outlined a rough structure first, it would save me a lot because like I end up with about 100,000 words each time, but I just don't use at all, and it's just like
mm,
the characters doing other stuff that's then is like never relevant.
that's fair.
So yeah, like
Wait,
I don't know, I need to sort of like be more organized, I think, with my structure and
yeah.
actually know what I'm writing at the start. But then at the same time I don't want to then feel like I've written it because then I just won't want to write it. So it's kind of
Yeah.
a fine balance.
That's fair. There was an
Yeah.
article I read that like broke down how to write a book in a 3 act structure, and it used the Hunger Games as an example. And
Right.
it broke down each chapter by like chapter 3 example would be the inciting incident, and then chapter 4
Mhm.
is like the result of the inciting incident, like the immediate reaction. And
Mhm.
I kind of used that as like a rough guideline for what should happen in each of my chapters. But like I said, I try and keep it vague because then I will feel inspired to write if I'm like not discovering the story either.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally get that because like we've got to be like entertained ourselves.
Yeah,
And it's
yeah,
really fun when characters just go off and do something like really unexpected.
yeah.
So yeah. So you mentioned the like ways that you construct characters, like using other characters for reference. That is such like a good idea, because like basically I think I need to do that. Because yeah, like when I'm writing my first draft, I've got no idea who the characters are, and then my second draft I'll have like the same character names, but they'll be like completely different characters. And then like my third draft, it will be the same, and I just sort of like write draft after draft until I feel that I've got the right personality for each of my characters. So again, you sound much more organized than me. Like, this is becoming a bit of a theme here.
I do a lot of prep work definitely before I write, because I also like, I try and figure out their personality, and then I also give them a goal, an obstacle, an epiphany. I think that's it. Yeah, those three things. And try and like relate that to their personality and like the world that they're in. So like, for example, in my YA thriller, my main character is at the school where she's like expected to be like perfect, and her whole thing is how she feels out of place because she doesn't have like this one thing that she's perfect at, and it affects like a lot of her character arc because she doesn't have the confidence to like make a lot of the decisions that she needs to make.
Oh, yeah, that sounds really really good when you're sort of like linking in sort of like the character traits to like the goal, and I guess like the action of the novel as well. Like, it will make it seem like really cohesive and smooth.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd love to talk a bit about tension, because like this is just like what I love talking about. So do you have any tips for aspiring writers, or like any writers in general, about how to sort of like maintain tension at appropriate times?
Ooh.
I know, it's quite a big question.
That was a big question you just threw in there.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a hard one. For me, I find if I'm feeling tense when I'm writing, that's a good sign that I'm not keeping the tension. And you gotta keep the readers on their feet. So you can use a lot of things to your advantage, like information they don't know. There's the like typical like running out of time. Whenever I have the sense that the tension's kind of like dipping, that's when I like to throw in like a twist.
Right, okay.
Like another like obstacle to overcome. I think that's it, because you also don't want so much tension that your reader doesn't have a time to breathe either.
Yeah,
so it's all about finding like that balance of like the tension rising and falling and etc.
Yeah, because it's kind of like got to be a bit like a roller coaster, I guess, where like it's got like high points, but then it does like dip down a bit. Because I know when I'm sort of like in my early drafts, and I love twists, and I love like throwing in as many twists as possible. But then like I'm very aware that with my early drafts I have way too many twists in it, and it's just like a bit relentless. And I'm just like, I need to give the reader time to breathe. So then I try and work out which twists I can remove. But I always fall in love with the twists that I think of like early on, and then I'm just like, no, I don't want to remove this one.
That's exactly it. Sometimes it can be like a really small twist though, like that too. Like just like the smallest thing can help keep the tension high if it's not like expected.
Yeah, and I think sort of like being aware of the different types of tension can be helpful as well. Like the types that like link to the protagonist's sort of internal goals, and also the external, especially with like the different types of conflict as well. Like I find that really helpful with my latest manuscript. I've been sort of like plotting internal tension and conflict against the external tension and conflict, and I've been trying it out to see if like when the internal one gets high, if the external one is low, and then like vice versa as well. So I'm just having lots of fun, and I've made some really pretty graphs for it as well, which have no relevance whatsoever, but it was fun making them.
I find it also helps. I mentioned structure of how I like structure my books. I find that helps me too to make sure the tension is still high, because like if I'm in a chapter where it's just like the immediate reaction to something that happened, the tension like probably dips by the end of that chapter. And then when a new like twist is introduced, it's obviously like when the tension goes up.
Yeah, definitely. So Do you use a lot of like cliffhangers then for some of your chapters?
I try to, because I like the
Yeah.
idea of like keeping readers reading.
Mhm.
But sometimes my chapters just end in like a natural place, and I'm like,
Yeah.
then the cliffhanger feels forced, you know?
Yeah.
So I'd rather like end it on like a natural point. But sometimes I do. It depends what the twist is and like how it naturally flows into like what's happening.
Yeah, definitely. Because
Yeah.
like that's the thing. It's got to kind of be like organic and feel like natural. Because
Yes.
like if we're sort of like forcing it in, then readers are going to be able to tell as well, I think, and then it won't seem very like organic. So
Yeah. Exactly.
yeah. Mm-hmm. So what are your favorite YA thrillers then?
My favorite YA thrillers. Ooh, let me like look at my bookshelf here.
Okay.
I think like my favorite of all time is probably Wilder Girls by Rory Power. I don't know
Yeah, I love that
classified
book.
as a thriller. That book was like a really big inspiration for the book I'm on sub with, actually. I love like that nature horror, like so good. Oh god, to try and think of other ones.
I know, I'm always like that when someone asks me like what are my favorite books. I'm just like, I can't think of any.
Exactly. I'm like, oh god, I've been put on the spot. Definitely Wilder Girls. I'm like trying to see what else. I like One of Us is Lying.
Oh yeah, of course.
Pretty common one, yeah.
Have you read any by Courtney Summers?
No, I haven't.
Oh, her books are so good. Like you have to read them. So like it's like really dark and like unreliable narrators and like
I
just love all that stuff. Yeah, so definitely read some of hers.
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna check that out. I'm drawing a blank. I'm like staring at my shelf. I'm like, I know that's a fantasy. No, that's a contemporary. What are your favorite YA books? I know this
now you're putting me on the spot. Yeah, so I love Sadie.
That's a good one.
Really, yeah, it's so good. And like with the podcast as well, like I really love thrillers that like use mixed media. So I just love that. And like in one of my manuscripts that I'm working on right now, I've got like a lot of mixed media in it, and it's just like so fun. Yeah, so yeah, now I'm like my mind is completely gone blank now, so I can't even think of any others. One's by Ellie Flynn. Like she's written some amazing YA thrillers, and yeah, I'm actually interviewing her later today, so that'll be fun. But,
that's exciting.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just like, I know I've read so many YA thrillers recently. My mind's gone completely blank.
Exactly how I feel.
Yeah. Yeah, like One of Us is Lying, and I read the sequel to that. One of Us is Next.
I haven't read the sequel yet. Oh, that reminds me. I really like We Were Liars.
Oh yes, by E. Lockhart.
Yes.
Yes, that is such a good book. That book inspired the one that I am on sub right now as well. So
cool. That's cool.
Yeah, I love anything with like unreliable narrators. Like and pretty much every manuscript, like YA thriller that I write, has an unreliable narrator. So I think that's kind of becoming my brand. It's just like really fun.
I'm kind of jealous because I always have wanted to write like an unreliable narrator, but I feel like I've yet to be like successful in that.
I don't know. I think because like I don't really plan out my books, it makes it a bit easier for me to write like an unreliable narrator. Because at the time when I'm writing, I don't know who's telling the truth, and it's not until like later drafts when I'll then decide which one of them is like lying, and then I'll just like create other storylines for the others that are true. I don't know. I feel like I'm explaining that really badly, but it kind of makes sense to me.
No, I totally get it. And there's me because I know what happens. I'm like trying so hard to withhold that information.
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely. And like yeah, because like whenever I'm like putting foreshadowing in, I always think that I've put way too much in and made it too obvious, and then I'll take a load of it out, and then I'm like, oh well, maybe I haven't got enough now. So yeah, I guess it's just like getting the balance right. Like it's quite a fine line, really. Yeah. So what other tips do you have for writers then? Like about pretty much any sort of like YA thriller books.
So for me, I I apparently write really good gory stuff in my thrillers. And people always ask me like how because I'm literally in like a pink room, like the girliest person alive, and I'm like this bloody like mess in my book. And I just think of things that like scare me and make me uncomfortable, and I write that. And I try to fight the feeling of uncomfortableness and like grossness as I'm writing, and like incorporate that. Like an example is the thought of like bugs under my skin freaks me out. Exactly.
Yeah.
So I've written that into a book before, not the one that I'm on sub with, but just things that like gross me out. Like if I'm grossed out, my reader's probably going to be grossed out. So that's my tip there. Again, like the biggest like thing I have is knowing the information and withholding it from readers, and that's like a really good tool to use to keep your readers guessing and not knowing what's going to happen next. Plot twists, I don't think always need to be foreshadowed, but they need to make sense in the world that you have. So it could be something that came out of nowhere that wasn't foreshadowed, but if it makes sense in the world, it was foreshadowed without needing to be foreshadowed, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, that does make sense. And
yeah.
I love it when I put in like a plot twist like towards the end, and then when I'm rereading the manuscript, I find like little clues that I've like subconsciously put in without realizing it.
Yeah,
like, that's just like the best feeling.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Another tip is just to read other thrillers, see what you like in those thrillers, what made them have you on your edge of your seat, and kind of like apply that to your own writing. Obviously not copy them, but like those like tools they use. So just keep those in mind for your own books.
Yeah, definitely. And like kind of similar to that, I always find it helpful like reading lots of reviews of like these other thrillers to like see what readers liked and what they didn't. And I find like that can be quite helpful. But then sometimes I'm like, well, maybe I shouldn't do that until after I've finished like quite a solid draft, because then I don't want to sort of like change what I'm writing because of it. Like it's still got to be sort of like authentic for me and like what I want to write. So yeah.
Trying to think of like other tips. I like writing like unexpected things. And sometimes I need to challenge myself. Like usually like the immediate thing I think of as like the twist is probably what readers are going to think of too, at least from what I think. So I tend to like brainstorm and try and like make a list of all the possibilities that could happen, and like pick based off that what I think is like the most unexpected. But like you have to foreshadow things too. So
yeah, that's true. So yeah, like how many different drafts do you do then before you've got like a manuscript that you're like thinking it's really solid and ready to go to your agent?
So usually like my second or third draft, which I know is like pretty like early on, but when I write my first draft, when I go in, I have like a good idea of like what I want to change, and so I do those changes, add where I need to. And then when I'm happy with that, I send it to beta readers. So technically my beta readers get my second draft.
Okay.
And then I make changes based on what they say. And at that point I send it to my agent. So my agent gets like my third draft.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds really cool, because like it's not until like I've got about like 7 or 8 drafts that I'm then like ready to share it with like beta readers. So like my agent gets like the 10th draft or something. So yeah, it's just like I love talking about different writing styles and like different writing processes that everyone has, because like it's always so different, and it's really interesting.
I just find that I get to a point where like I know something needs to be fixed, but because I've read it so much and it's so close to me, I can't see that. So sending to beta readers is like the most helpful thing for me, because it almost feels like they have like a book club where they talk about my book. They all point out similar things, and I'm like, wow, like how did I not see this?
Yeah, and like if someone like if a lot of people pointing out the same thing, that it is something that does need changing as well. Because
Mhm.
I guess like that's like an advantage of having like quite a few different beta readers rather than just like one, because then
Yeah,
it might like
exactly.
yeah.
But you also don't want like too many beta readers because then you're getting too much
Yeah,
feedback.
that
And
is
you
true.
burn the book.
Yeah, like a few years ago, I had like this manuscript and I sent it out to 10 beta readers, and like none of them agreed on anything. Like they were all saying like different things, and I was like, well, I don't know which ones to actually work on. So it was a bit of a nightmare. Like I just had like way too much feedback given to me, and I was like, I don't know what to do. No,
Yeah,
don't know.
exactly.
So
I usually send to like 4 beta readers tops. And
yeah,
then
yeah,
they
4 is
usually
a good number.
yeah, and they usually all point out at least like 1 or 2 things similar. And then
Hmm.
the other feedback I just kind of go off if I agree or disagree. Um,
Yeah.
because sometimes just because they snagged on something doesn't mean like that's what needs to be changed.
Hmm.
Something needs to be changed if that caught their attention, but the specific thing doesn't necessarily need to be changed, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, because it can often relate to something else, like maybe the setup for that bit
Yeah,
isn't like quite right.
exactly.
And I found that often like beta readers will like suggest a way to improve it, but quite often like it will often be like a different thing that does need improving rather than like what they sort of see it as on the surface level.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
mhm. Yeah, so I think it's like beta readers are like important, but it's also like important to sort of like trust your own judgment as well,
Mhm.
and make sure that it all like feels authentic to the story that you're writing.
Exactly. Like I think like the
Mhm.
best advice I could possibly give to like any writer is like trust your gut feeling. And that's really
Yes.
hard to do. Like that's much easier said than done. But like if in your gut you don't feel like that change should be made, or if you think it should be made, then that's I think a good sign to make that fix.
Yeah, definitely. So I can't believe how quickly like the time is going for this interview, but like we're almost at the end now. And it
Oh
just
my
seems like I've only been talking to you for like 2 minutes.
gosh.
But yeah, is there anything else that you would like to say whilst we're still recording?
Honestly, like at the end of the day, you gotta write for yourself. Like I
Hmm.
know querying is really hard and being on sub is really hard, but
Hmm.
as long as you remember like why you're writing, like I love getting lost in a story. It's like a coping mechanism usually for like my anxiety and whatnot.
Hmm.
So if I'm having fun, enjoying myself, that's all that matters to me over like getting an agent. I got lucky that I got an agent, or my book selling on sub, so
Yeah.
and not to
Yeah,
give
I
up.
guess like yeah. And like knowing sort of like the personal reasons like why you write, and because I guess that will like link into what your like priorities are and what your overall goals are as well. So
Mhm. Yeah, exactly.
yeah, makes sense. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining me for this interview for YA ThrillerCon.
Thank you for having me. This is really fun.
Yeah, definitely. Like, I have to keep in contact with you because you seem really cool.
Oh, you're so really cool
Oh, well, thank you.
too.
Just trying.